Hey everyone, and welcome back to Western Flavors. Before we begin our new episode, let's recap the intense and dramatic events from our last story. We saw a quiet, rainy day at Heartland turn into a storm of conflict after Amy confessed her vision of Ty to Nathan. His patient facade finally shattered, leading to a raw and angry confrontation in the barn. The story then took a shocking turn, revealing that Nathan is hiding a dark secret involving a mysterious man he had held captive, a man who has now escaped. The episode ended with a huge reveal for us. That man is alive in Montana, a quiet ranch hand known as Benjamin. If you missed that incredible game-changing story, the link to the full playlist is in the description below. If you're enjoying this new season, please take a second to hit that like button and be sure to subscribe so you never miss a chapter. Now today we see the emotional fallout of Nathan's outburst and a mother's realization that her own grief is having an unintended effect on her daughter. Let's get into the story. Amy's secret memory box for Ty, Heartland Season 19 Fanfiction Episode 5. The morning after their reconciliation was quiet, but it was a heavy, thoughtful quiet, not a peaceful one. The fight with Nathan had been a violent, emotional storm, and their conversation by the pond had been the fragile, uncertain calm in its wake. The rain had finally passed, leaving a world that was washed clean and brilliantly green under a vast blue Alberta sky. But Amy's heart had not cleared with the weather. She moved through her morning routine in a state of profound emotional exhaustion. She had accepted his apology. On the surface, things were back to normal. The external conflict was resolved. But internally, Amy was a tangled mess. She had stepped into a new, undefined territory with Nathan. The kiss, the fight, the apology, it had all accelerated their relationship from a quiet, supportive friendship into something more. Something she hadn't asked for and wasn't sure she was ready for. The red flag she had seen, his quiet possessiveness, was a small, persistent flicker of unease in the back of her mind, a warning light she was trying her best to ignore. She felt a profound gratitude for his friendship, a genuine affection for the good man he was, but the idea of a future with him, which had seemed like a fragile, distant possibility just a week ago, was now a very real, very complicated, and very terrifying question that demanded an answer. She was so consumed by this internal debate that she barely registered the quiet of the house. It wasn't until after Jack and Lisa had finished breakfast and headed out to the barn that she realized she hadn't seen Lindy all morning. A small, familiar flicker of unease went through her. The house was too quiet. She walked up the familiar, creaking staircase, her footsteps echoing in the silent hall. She pushed open the door to Lindy's room, expecting to find her playing with her toy horses, lost in a world of her own creation. But the room was still, the herd of plastic ponies untouched on the floor. Lindy was sitting on her window seat, her small back to the door, looking out at the vast green expanse of the foothills.
Hey, sweetie. I didn't hear you come down for breakfast. Are you hungry?
Lindy didn't turn around, she just gave a small, almost imperceptible shake of her head. Amy's unease sharpened into a real maternal concern. She walked over to the window seat and saw that her daughter wasn't just looking out the window. She was holding something. A small, silver picture frame. It was the only photograph Lindy had of the three of them together. A picture taken on her 4th birthday, just a few months before Ty had died. Amy's heart clenched with a fresh wave of pain. She saw the profound, quiet sadness on her daughter's face, the way her small thumb was gently, almost reverently, tracing the outline of her father's smiling face in the photograph. And in that moment, Amy had a devastating realization. For the past few days, her entire world had revolved around her own emotional turmoil. Her strange vision of Ty, her complicated feelings for Nathan, her fight, her reconciliation, it had all been about her. And in her self-absorption, she had been completely blind to the silent, emotional storm that was taking place in her own daughter's heart. She had been so focused on protecting Lindy from the messy, adult complications of her life that she had, in a way, abandoned her in her grief. She had stopped talking about Ty, had stopped sharing the happy, funny stories, believing that it was kinder to let the memory rest. She saw now, with a clarity that was a physical pain, how wrong she had been. She wasn't protecting Lindy, she was starving her. She was starving her of the one thing she needed most, the story of the father she had lost. The realization was a call to action. She could not fix the complicated mess with Nathan right now. She could not solve the mystery of what she had seen in the stars. But this she could fix. She sat down on the window seat beside her daughter, her own heart aching with a new, fierce and maternal resolve. She would not let her daughter navigate this quiet sea of grief alone for one more second. Amy sat on the window seat beside her daughter, the silence in the room no longer empty but filled with a new, shared, and unspoken understanding. The small silver picture frame lay between them, a portal to a life that felt both a million miles away and as close as a heartbeat. She gently touched Lindy's hand, her voice a soft, quiet murmur, a deliberate and gentle anchor in the sea of her daughter's quiet grief.
He loved that picture. He kept a copy of it in his wallet. He said it was his lucky charm, that it reminded him of his two favorite girls.
Lindy looked up, her eyes wide with a quiet, curious surprise. This was a new piece of information, a small, precious detail she hadn't known, a secret story just for her.
You know, this house, this whole ranch, it's full of your daddy's memories. Happy memories, funny memories, they're tucked away in all the corners. I think, I think maybe I haven't been very good at sharing them with you. I've been keeping them all to myself. And that's not fair, because they're your memories too.
She took a deep breath, a new, brilliant idea, born of her sudden, powerful realization, taking shape in her mind.
What do you say we go on a treasure hunt? Special kind of treasure hunt. A treasure hunt for Daddy's memories. We can find all of his favorite things, all the things that tell his story, and we can put them all together in a special place, a memory box. What do you think?
A small, hopeful light began to flicker in Lindy's sad, quiet eyes. The idea of a game, a mission, a tangible project to focus her confusing, formless grief on was an irresistible invitation. She gave a small, hesitant nod, her first real smile of the day beginning to bloom on her face. And so, their journey began. It was a warm, nostalgic pilgrimage through the heart of their own home, a quiet, loving archaeological dig into the life of the man they had both lost. They started in the living room, the heart of the house. Amy led Lindy to the tall, overflowing bookshelf that flanked the great stone fireplace, a place filled with the stories of 100 different worlds.
Okay, your daddy was a vet, you know that. He loved science and he was so smart. But he had a secret, artistic soul too. He loved to read, especially poetry.
Her fingers trailed along the spines of the books, past thick veterinary textbooks and old, leather-bound classics, finally stopping on a small, thin, and well-worn volume. She pulled it from the shelf. It was a collection of poems by Mary Oliver, its cover soft and creased from years of use, the title barely legible. She opened it, and the pages were full of Ty's familiar, slightly messy handwriting, notes and underlines on all his favorite passages.
This was his favorite. He used to read it to me, out on the porch on summer nights. He said the poems reminded him of this place, of the beauty of the wild things. He said they were quiet and strong, just like you.
She handed the book to Lindy, who took it with a new, reverent care, her small fingers tracing the title. It was not just a book anymore. It was a piece of her father's secret, artistic soul. Their next stop was Jack's workshop, a masculine sanctuary of sawdust, oil, and organized chaos. The room was empty, Jack having gone out to check on the fences. Amy led Lindy to a dusty, forgotten corner, behind a stack of lumber that hadn't been moved in years. There, hanging on a wooden peg, was an old, battered, and hopelessly stained cowboy hat. It was a deep chocolate brown, its brim misshapen, a testament to years of hard work under the hot Alberta sun.
This was the first real cowboy hat he ever owned. Your grandpa Jack gave it to him for his 18th birthday. He was so proud of it. He wore it every single day until the sweat and the rain and the sun practically molded it to the shape of his head. He said it was the hat that finally made him feel like he belonged here, like he was a part of the family.
She took the hat down from the peg, the felt soft and worn under her fingertips. She gently placed it on Lindy's small head. It was absurdly large, falling down over her eyes and resting on her ears, but Lindy just giggled, a real, genuine, and beautiful sound that made Amy's own heart feel a little bit lighter. The hat was not just an old, dusty object. It was a symbol of her father's journey, of the lost boy who had found his home. The hunt continued, a series of small, precious discoveries that painted a vibrant, multifaceted portrait of the man he had been. In the back of a closet in the mudroom, they found his old, worn-out work boots, the leather scuffed and softened, still holding the shape of his feet, a silent testament to the thousands of miles he had walked on this land, mending fences, birthing calves, and building a life. In a dusty box in the basement, they found a small, slightly tarnished trophy from his first and only foray into amateur rodeo, a disastrous but hilarious day that had ended with him covered in mud, but laughing harder than Amy had ever seen him laugh. Their final stop was the most sacred and the most difficult. It was the place that was most uniquely his and hers, the barn loft. They climbed the steep wooden ladder, their footsteps echoing in the quiet, cavernous space. The loft was a cathedral of memory, the air thick with the sweet, nostalgic scent of 100 summers of hay, the late afternoon sun slanting through the high, dusty window in golden, ethereal shafts. Amy led Lindy to a small, forgotten corner, to a battered old wooden trunk that had served as their shared hiding place, their secret clubhouse, when they were just kids falling in love. She knelt on the floor and slowly, reverently lifted the heavy lid. Inside, nestled amongst a collection of their own teenage treasures, old comic books, a faded photograph of them at a school dance, a silly trophy for best couple from a long-forgotten party, was a small, intricately carved wooden horse. It was the very first thing Ty had ever carved for her, a clumsy but beautiful testament to his burgeoning secret talent.
He made me this.
She whispered, her voice thick with emotion as she picked up the small, smooth object.
Right here, in this loft. We were just kids. He was so shy about it. He thought it was silly, a tough kid from the city whittling a piece of wood. But I knew it was a piece of his heart.
She turned the small horse over in her hand, its familiar, beloved weight a comfort.
He told me he carved it because it reminded him of me. A little bit wild, a little bit stubborn, but strong and free.
She handed the horse to Lindy, who took it with a gentle, two-handed care, her small fingers tracing the smooth, carved lines. She looked from the horse to her mother's tear-streaked but smiling face, and in that moment she understood. Her father wasn't just a sad black-and-white photograph in a silver frame. He was a universe of stories, of laughter, of secret, artistic talents, and of a deep, profound, and enduring love. He was real. They gathered their treasures, the book of poetry, the worn-out hat, the dusty trophy, the scuffed boots, and the small, perfect wooden horse, and made their way back to the main house. They were no longer just carrying a collection of old, forgotten objects. They were carrying the beautiful, tangible, and living pieces of Ty Borden's story. And for the first time, it was not a story of loss. It was a story of a life, a beautiful, complicated, and well-lived life. The hunt for his memories was over. Now, the real healing could begin. They returned to the living room, their arms laden with the artifacts of a life well lived. They spread their treasures out on the large, braided rug in front of the stone fireplace, creating a small, sacred museum of Ty Borden. The afternoon sun slanted through the windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air and casting a warm golden glow on the book of poetry, the worn-out hat, the dusty rodeo trophy, the scuffed boots, and the small, perfect wooden horse. For a long moment, Amy and Lindy just knelt there, looking at the collection, the tangible physical evidence of the man who was so much more than just a memory. Amy found a beautiful empty cedar box in the back of a linen closet, a chest that had once belonged to her mother, Marian. It was the perfect vessel, a container of memories passed down through a generation of strong Heartland women. They placed it in the center of the rug, and the quiet healing work began.
Okay, first things first. This box needs to be beautiful. It needs to be a proper home for Daddy's memories. What should we put on it?
Lindy, her earlier sadness completely gone, replaced by a new, creative, and purposeful energy, immediately took charge of the artistic direction. She ran to her room and returned with her box of paints and brushes, her face a mask of serious concentration. For the next hour, she was a master artist at work. She painted the lid of the box with a vibrant, beautiful, and slightly clumsy mural. There was a bright yellow sun in one corner, a range of jagged, snow-capped mountains that were unmistakably the Rockies, and in the center, a green field with 3 stick figures, a mommy, a little girl, and a daddy, all holding hands under the vast Alberta sky. Amy watched her, a lump forming in her throat. It was a perfect, childish, and heartbreakingly beautiful portrait of their family, whole and happy. She didn't correct the wobbly lines or the slightly too large sun. It was perfect. While Lindy painted, Amy took on the role of family historian. She wrote out small, descriptive tags for each item on pieces of parchment paper, her elegant handwriting telling the story behind each object, transforming them from simple possessions into chapters of a life. She picked up the small, tarnished rodeo trophy first, a smile touching her lips as the memory, once so distant, came rushing back in vivid detail.
This one. This one is from the funniest and most disastrous day. Your daddy decided, for one day only, that he was going to be a rodeo star. He entered the amateur steer wrestling competition at the Hudson Fair. He was so confident.
She laughed, a real, genuine sound.
He missed the steer completely on his first try, just launched himself off the horse and landed face first in the mud. He was so mad and so embarrassed. But then he looked up, saw me laughing so hard I was crying, and he started laughing too. He was covered in mud from head to toe. They gave him this trophy for most spectacular failure. He said it was the best prize he ever won.
Lindy giggled, imagining her strong, capable father in such a ridiculous situation. The story had transformed the dusty trophy from a symbol of a forgotten achievement into a symbol of his humor, his humility, and his ability to laugh at himself. Next, Amy picked up the worn volume of Mary Oliver's poetry, its pages soft and thin from years of being read and reread. She opened it to a page with a dog-eared corner, a passage heavily underlined in Ty's familiar scrawl.
This was his favorite. He used to read it to me, right here, in front of the fire on cold nights.
Her voice dropped to a soft, reverent murmur as she read the underlined words aloud.
When it's over, I want to say, all my life I was a bride, married to amazement. I was the bridegroom, taking the world into my arms. He said that's how he felt here at Heartland, like he had been given a gift so amazing, he just wanted to hold on to it forever.
She looked at Lindy, her own eyes shining with tears.
He had a secret, beautiful soul, your daddy. He was a scientist and a poet.
Finally, she picked up the small wooden horse, the most precious artifact of all. She held it in the palm of her hand, its familiar, beloved weight a comfort.
And this was the beginning. Before he was a vet, before he was even really a cowboy, he was just a boy. A scared, lonely boy who didn't know how to say what was in his heart. So he showed me. He carved me this horse, right up there in the barn loft. It was his way of telling me he understood me, that he saw me. It was the first piece of his heart he ever trusted me with.
She handed the horse to Lindy, who took it with a gentle, two-handed care, her small fingers tracing the smooth, carved lines. The story had transformed the small wooden object into a powerful talisman, a symbol of the very beginning of her own story. They carefully, lovingly placed each treasure inside the newly decorated box. The book of poetry, the dusty trophy, the worn-out hat, the scuffed boots. And last of all, Amy gently placed the small wooden horse right in the center, a quiet, steady heart in their newly constructed museum of memories. The hunt for his memories was over. Now the real healing could begin. While Amy and Lindy were on their quiet, healing pilgrimage through the past at Heartland, a different kind of journey was unfolding hundreds of miles away, in the vast, sun-bleached expanse of Montana. The man known as Benjamin was moving through his day with the steady, practiced rhythm of a seasoned ranch hand. His work was his only anchor, the one thing that made sense in a life that felt like a story with the first half of its pages ripped out. He was respected for his quiet competence, his almost supernatural way with the animals, and the tireless, relentless energy he brought to every task. But he was a man who lived entirely in the present because the past was a locked, windowless room to which he had no key. The name Amy Fleming had become a persistent, low-grade hum in the back of his mind since he'd first heard it by the campfire. It was a sound without a source, a melody without a song. It meant nothing to him, and yet it felt like it meant everything. It was a splinter in his mind, a piece of a puzzle he didn't know he was supposed to be solving. He had tried to push it away, to bury it under the weight of hard physical labor, but it was stubborn. It would surface at the oddest moments, when he was mending a fence, when he was watching the sunset paint the rugged mountains in shades of orange and purple, when he was lying in his bunk in the dead of night, staring up at the dark, unfamiliar ceiling. Amy Fleming. He had asked one of the older, more knowledgeable cowboys about her, the one named Hank. The conversation had been brief, a casual inquiry he had tried to make sound like idle curiosity.
That horse whisperer you were all talking about the other night. The one from up in Canada. What's her story?
Oh, she's a bit of a legend, that one. Comes from a long line of them, or so they say. Her mother had the gift too. They run a big family outfit up there in the Alberta foothills. Heartland, it's called, place for troubled horses. The story goes there's no horse she can't gentle. A real miracle worker. The details, Alberta, foothills, a mother with a gift, a ranch called Heartland, had meant nothing to him on a conscious level. But each word had been a small, invisible stone dropped into the deep, still well of his forgotten memories, sending out faint, imperceptible ripples. The feeling of a profound, aching familiarity was a constant, low-grade fever in his soul. Tonight that fever was running a little higher. He lay in his narrow bunk in the quiet, communal bunkhouse, the only sounds the rhythmic breathing of the other sleeping cowboys and the distant, lonely cry of a coyote. He was exhausted, his body aching from a 16-hour day in the saddle, repairing fences in the high country. But his mind, for the first time in a long time, was restless. He was tired of the emptiness. He was tired of the not knowing. He closed his eyes, and instead of the usual blank darkness, he tried to focus on the name, Amy Fleming. He let it echo in the silence of his own mind, and as he drifted into the hazy, liminal space between waking and sleeping, something began to happen. His dream was not a story. It was not a coherent narrative. It was a series of vivid, disconnected, and overwhelmingly powerful sensory fragments, like flashes of lightning illuminating a forgotten landscape. First, there was the feeling, the impossible, specific, and deeply familiar feeling of a small child's hand, tucked trustingly into his own. He could feel the smallness of the fingers, the warmth of the grip, a sense of a profound paternal connection that was so real it made his heart ache in his sleep. It was a feeling of being a protector, an anchor, a father. Then there was the scent, a rich, earthy, and intoxicating smell, the scent of old, worn leather, of sweet, dry hay, and of horses. It was the scent of a place that felt on a deep cellular level like home. It was not the dusty, sage-scented air of Montana. It was something different, something sacred. It was the smell of safety, of belonging. And finally, there was the image. It was the most powerful and the most fleeting of all. It was not a full scene, just a single, brilliant, sun-drenched snapshot burned onto the back of his eyelids, a woman's face. She was laughing, her head thrown back, her blonde hair a halo of pure golden light against a brilliant blue sky. He couldn't see her features clearly, could not define the shape of her eyes or her mouth, but he could see her smile. It was a smile so full of a deep, abiding love and a shared, secret joy that it pierced the 4 years of fog in his mind like a bolt of lightning. It was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen, and he knew, with a certainty that defied all logic, that the smile was for him. He woke with a violent, shuddering gasp, his heart hammering against his ribs as if he had just been pulled from the depths of a deep, dark ocean. He sat bolt upright in his bunk, the rough wool blanket pulled around his waist. The bunkhouse was still dark, the other men still sleeping, their soft snores a stark contrast to the chaotic, violent storm that was raging inside him. The dream was already beginning to fade, the images dissolving like smoke, the details becoming fuzzy and indistinct. But the feeling of it, the profound, aching sense of loss for a life he couldn't remember, was a raw, open wound in his soul. He didn't know who the woman was. He didn't know who the child was. He didn't know the name of the place that smelled like home. But he knew, with an absolute, soul-deep certainty, that they were real and that they had once been his. He was not just a man with no past. He was a man who had lost a universe of love, of laughter, of belonging. He swung his legs out of his bunk, his movements stiff and uncoordinated. He pulled on his boots and walked out of the bunkhouse into the cold, pre-dawn air of the Montana high country. The sky was just beginning to turn from a deep, inky black to a pale, bruised purple in the east. The stars were still brilliant, cold, and impossibly distant. He stood there for a long time, a lone, solitary figure in the vast, empty landscape, the cold air a welcome, grounding shock to his system. He was a man who had been content with his quiet, simple, and empty life. He had accepted his fate as a man without a history, but the dream had changed everything. It had given him a glimpse of what he had lost, and in doing so it had ignited a new and terrifying fire within him. It was the fire of want, of need, of a desperate, primal longing to be whole again. And in the cold, quiet darkness of the Montana morning, a new, fierce, and desperate purpose was born. He had to know. He had to find them. He had to find his way back to the woman with the brilliant, loving smile. He didn't know how. He didn't know where to start. But his life, which had been a quiet, aimless drift, now had a direction. His journey home had just unknowingly and finally begun. Amy and Lindy returned from their emotional treasure hunt through the past, their arms laden with the precious, tangible pieces of Ty's story. They walked back into the warm, bright kitchen of the main house, their earlier sadness replaced by a new, shared sense of purpose. The book of poetry, the worn-out hat, the dusty rodeo trophy, the scuffed boots, and the small, perfect wooden horse. They were not just a collection of old, forgotten objects anymore. They were a resurrection. They found a beautiful empty wooden box in the back of a linen closet, a cedar chest that had once belonged to Amy's mother. It was the perfect vessel, a container of memories passed down through a generation of strong Heartland women. They spent the rest of the afternoon in the living room, a quiet, creative team on a sacred mission. They carefully cleaned and polished each treasure. Lindy, with her small artistic hands, decorated the outside of the box with painted pictures of horses and mountains, a vibrant, colorful tribute to the father she was rediscovering. Amy wrote out small, descriptive tags for each item on pieces of parchment paper, her elegant handwriting telling the story behind each object, transforming them from simple possessions into chapters of a life. It was a quiet, profoundly healing activity. With every story she told, with every happy memory she shared, Amy felt the heavy, sorrowful weight that had been sitting on her heart for 4 long years begin to lift. She was not just telling these stories for Lindy, she was telling them for herself. She was reminding herself of the joy, the laughter, and the deep, uncomplicated love that had defined her life with Ty. She was replacing the traumatic, painful memory of his loss with the beautiful, vibrant memory of his life. As the sun began to set, casting a long golden glow through the living room windows, their work was complete. They stood back and looked at the finished memory box. It was beautiful, a simple, heartfelt, and deeply personal monument to the man they had both loved so much. They decided together on its permanent home, not hidden away in a closet or in the attic, but in a place of honor on a low, sun-drenched bookshelf in the main living room, right next to the fireplace. It was a place where it could be seen every day, a constant, comforting presence. Amy knelt on the floor in front of the bookshelf, her arm around her daughter's small shoulders.
There. Now whenever you miss him, whenever you want to feel close to him, you can come here, you can open the box, and you can hold a piece of his story in your hands. He sips not just a sad memory, sweetie. He sips a part of this house. He sips a part of us, and he will be, always.
Lindy looked up at her mother, her eyes shining with a new, quiet understanding. She reached out and placed her small hand on the lid of the box, a silent, reverent touch. The fragile, tentative piece they had been searching for had finally been found, not in trying to forget the past, but in bravely, lovingly, and beautifully embracing it. Later that evening, the family was gathered for dinner. The change in the atmosphere was palpable. The heavy, unspoken grief that had been a constant, low-grade hum in the house was gone, replaced by a new, lighter energy. Lindy, no longer a quiet, watchful shadow, was a bright, happy participant, proudly telling her Grandpa Jack all about the treasures she and her mother had found. Amy, watching her daughter, felt a profound sense of peace. She had taken a small, simple step, and it had changed everything. She knew the road ahead was still long and complicated. Her feelings for Nathan were still a tangled, unresolved knot in her own heart. But for the first time in a very long time, she felt like she was standing on solid ground. Her family was her anchor. Ty's memory, now a source of joy and not just pain, was her compass. And with those two things to guide her, she knew with a quiet, dawning certainty that whatever came next, she would be okay. The long, lonely winter of her grief was finally, truly beginning to thaw, and in its place, a small, fragile, and beautiful new spring was beginning to bloom.